What if the last words of a dying pope weren't prayers but warnings? What if behind centuries of marble and stained glass, there was a room so dangerous even cardinals were forbidden to enter it? And what if the only person brave enough to open that room was a mother, not a bishop? Karoline Leavitt, never asked to carry the Vatican's most terrifying secret. But now she's holding the map, the message, and the key. Before you scroll away, ask yourself, if she fails, what truth stays buried forever? Call to action. If you believe truth is worth risking everything for, don't just watch. Hit subscribe so you don't miss Part 8, Her Journey to Rome. Leave a comment below. Would you walk into room 3 and share this story? Because silence is what they're counting on.
You won't believe what she found inside the Pope's final journal, because it wasn't meant for the world to see. When Karoline Leavitt, a White House press secretary, was handed a sealed Vatican envelope and a map hidden from even the cardinals, she uncovered something that could shake the church to its foundation. Secrets, warnings, a masked meeting in room 3, and now threats against her family. This isn't fiction, it's unfolding live, and the next move could change history. If you believe truth is still worth defending, watch this to the end. What happens next may leave you speechless. It had been 32 days since Karoline Leavitt shattered the airwaves with a red-sealed envelope from the Vatican and the final words of Pope Francis. America hadn't stopped talking. Some called her a patriot. Others said she was reckless. But tonight, under the same bright Fox News lights, Karoline walked back into the studio, not with an envelope this time, but with something older, quieter, and more dangerous. A leather-bound book, a book that should not exist. Sean Hannity, standing as still as the silence in the room, welcomed her without flair. "She's not here tonight as a press secretary," he said slowly, letting the words settle. "She's here as a witness to something the cardinals weren't supposed to find." The camera pulled in close on the small book clutched in her hand. Worn edges, cracked spine, no title. Just age and weight. Karoline set it on the table between them like it might explode. "This was left at my front door 3 nights ago," she said, voice steady. "No knock, no return address. Just this and a note. 1 line." She pulled out the paper and read aloud. "The final map was never meant for the cardinals." Sean didn't blink. "And what is it?" Karoline paused, eyes scanning the crowd behind the glass. "It's not just his word," she said. "It's a plan, a layout, a confession." She flipped the book open to a marked page, yellowed brittle. The ink faded. "Handwriting matches Pope Francis's final letters. I've already confirmed it." Hannity leaned forward. "So, what are we looking at?" Karoline turned the page again, this time to a hand-drawn map, uneven lines crisscrossed with small Latin notations and 3 circles marked in red ink. "This," she said, "is a floor plan beneath St. Peter's Basilica. But this part." She pointed to one of the red circles. "It doesn't appear on any official Vatican archive. It's labeled Arx Silentium, the Fortress of Silence." A murmur rippled through the audience. "This is what he meant," she continued. "Before he died, the Pope wrote that there were truths the Church could not speak aloud and secrets even cardinals were not allowed to know. He believed one day someone outside the institution would be needed to finish what he could not." Sean's face darkened. "And he meant you." Karoline didn't answer. She didn't have to. "Why now?" he asked. "Why come back on air with this?" "Because they're already watching," she said plainly. "And because I believe this book isn't just a map. I believe it's a warning." She flipped to a new section of the book, this one written more erratically, almost in a rush. The words were in Italian, but the translation was already tucked beneath it. She read, "If I should fall, tell her to go where the torch failed. Only she will hear the echo." Sean turned to the audience. "And that doesn't terrify you?" "It should," Karoline replied. "But that doesn't make it any less true." The screen behind them cut to a high-resolution scan of the book's central map. Arrows, tunnels, chambers, Latin code. It didn't look like a hoax. It looked like blueprints. "What's in these rooms?" Sean asked. Karoline looked straight into the lens. I don't know. Yet. But you're going? She nodded. If they haven't sealed it off already. Sean exhaled. Who do you think left the book? I don't know, she said. But it wasn't random. They knew where I lived. They knew what I would recognize. And they knew the right time to send it. She looked back at the book and closed it gently. This doesn't belong to the church anymore. It belongs to all of us now. For a moment, the studio was silent. Then Sean turned to the camera. You heard her. This isn't about politics anymore. It's about legacy, and it's about danger. She holds something in her hands tonight that someone tried to bury. And the next steps, whatever they are, could shake far more than one religion. Karoline sat, hands folded over the leather-bound book, her jaw tense. I never wanted this, she said, but the truth doesn't always ask for permission. Cue the music. The leather-bound book still sat between them, quiet and worn like an old scar. But as Karoline Leavitt opened it again under the studio lights, the audience leaned in. Not for drama, but for something deeper. Reverence. A sense that what they were about to witness wasn't just another political spectacle. It was history cracking open, one trembling page at a time. Karoline turned to a section she hadn't shown in part 1. The handwriting here was different, more uneven, slightly slanted with ink that bled at the edges like it had been written in a rush. No printed letterhead. No papal crest, just raw human handwriting. It was as she softly explained the last known writing of Pope Francis before his death. Sean Hannity lowered his voice. And you're sure this is authentic? I had it reviewed by 2 forensic specialists and 1 Vatican historian, Karoline said. They matched it to known private journals of Pope Francis. The stroke pressure, the ink formula, everything lines up. And the dates match the last week of his life. He was writing while the world thought he was recovering. She gently turned the next page, revealing a hand-drawn map of the Vatican's underground structure, an architectural layer the public had never seen. Not the usual crypts or archives, but deeper. Narrow corridors, curved symbols. 3 areas were circled in red ink, with markings beside each one. Room 3 Crux Spirita and Arc Silentium. The audience sat in absolute stillness. This was drawn by the Pope himself, Sean asked, staring at the sketch. Karoline nodded. And this line at the bottom, it hit me the moment I read it. She tilted the book to the camera and read aloud, If I fall, tell her to enter where the torch once failed. There was a pause. Sean glanced over, voice low. Do you think he meant you? Karoline didn't answer immediately. Her eyes drifted for a moment, not from hesitation, but from the weight of the question. Then she said quietly, I think he hoped someone would come along who hadn't made peace with silence. And maybe he knew I wouldn't. She flipped another page. This time the Pope's words were less structured, almost journal-like. Notes scrawled in margins. Latin phrases struck out and replaced. But one sentence written 3 times stood out. The light inside room 3 must not be lost. Not again. Hannity leaned forward, visibly disturbed. Do you know what's in that room? No, Karoline replied. But I know what he feared about it. She pulled out a folded piece of parchment from the back of the book. This was tucked behind the back cover. He must have hidden it. She unfolded it carefully to reveal what looked like a coded key symbols beside letters corresponding to pages in the book. It's like he wanted someone to follow trail, she said, but not someone from inside the system. Sean shook his head slowly. This is dangerous stuff, Karoline. You're saying there's a section of the Vatican no one talks about. And the Pope, before dying, drew a map, hid a cipher, and left a message for someone outside. Yes, she said firmly, and he marked it all as forbidden to copy. Not even cardinals were meant to see it. That's why the note left at my door said, the final map was never meant for the cardinals. He knew the institution would bury it. Sean looked at the audience. And you're revealing it live. Now Karoline gave a half smile. Because waiting has never made evil retreat. Another page. This one included a passage in red ink likely written during one of the Pope's last lucid hours. It was heartbreaking in its simplicity. I failed to open the 3rd room. I lack the strength or the courage, but I still believe she will find it. Perhaps truth belongs to the young or the wounded. The room chilled. For a few moments, no one spoke. Then Karoline spoke again, firmer this time. I don't know what room 3 holds. I don't know why it was hidden. But I do know this: I was never supposed to see this book. And yet here it is, delivered not through official channels, but left at my doorstep. That means someone out there wants the story told. Sean folded his hands. But you know what this could cost you, right? She nodded. Yes, my position, my safety, maybe more. He asked softly, then why do it? Karoline paused, her voice slowing for just a beat. Because the Pope trusted that someone outside the hierarchy might still believe truth is sacred, and because I have a son. One day, he'll ask me if I stayed quiet when I held the evidence. I don't want to lie to him. She closed the book. In his final pages, Pope Francis didn't talk about power. He talked about failure, about betrayal, about rooms locked not by keys but by fear. This wasn't written for the press. It wasn't written for bishops. It was written for someone who still asks questions. Sean turned to the camera again, this time almost reverently. America, what you've just heard is not conspiracy theory. It's the literal last record of a man who once led 1.3 billion Catholics. And it's now in the hands of a woman who's risking everything to read it out loud. Karoline folded the parchment, slid it back into the book's spine, and looked straight ahead. I didn't come here to prove a point, she said. I came here to follow a voice that died, but didn't stay silent. The map leads somewhere, and I intend to find out where. The book was closed now, but what it revealed refused to stay silent. Karoline Leavitt's voice, once uncertain in the first broadcast, now rang clearer, faster, sharper. As if each page of Pope Francis's private journal didn't just expose secrets, but pushed her forward like steps on a dark staircase. And this next step, it had a name: S. Naman. Seated across from Sean Hannity, again Karoline opened to a flag section she hadn't dared show before. The text wasn't neat. The handwriting had grown more frantic. The Pope's words no longer spoke from the throne of doctrine, but from the edge of fear. This is where it gets dangerous, Karoline warned. Because what he writes here, this isn't about hidden rooms, this is about hidden people. She turned the book toward the camera and began reading slowly, deliberately. They wear cassocks, but speak with coins. Their God is order, not mercy. Sean blinked. He's talking about clergy. No, she said. He's talking about infiltrators, a group he once believed could help rebuild the church from within. But he realized, too late, they weren't there to rebuild. They were there to repurpose. She paused. The name is written 3 times in this section, S. Naman. The name hung in the studio like smoke, unfamiliar to the general public, but now impossible to forget. Karoline continued. This wasn't speculation. These weren't outside critics. These were insiders, financial advisors, theological reformers, even a few bishops who formed a private network. Their mission, according to the Pope's own words, was to modernize the message, monetize the mystery, and neutralize dissent. Sean sat back stunned. And he was working with them. At first, Karoline admitted. That's what shook me most. He believed in reform. He believed the church needed to address real corruption. So, when a group of high-level insiders came offering strategy, technology, even discreet funding, he said yes. She flipped to the next entry. The ink was smudged as if written with a shaking hand. I invited them through the back gate. Now they've changed the locks. Sean's voice dropped. So you're saying this wasn't infiltration. This was invitation turned invasion. Exactly. Karoline nodded. And what they promised as reform, the Pope later described as a spiritual algorithm, optimized faith, programmable values, packaged morality. A few audience members shifted in their seats. And what happened once? He tried to stop them, Sean asked. Karoline looked down. That's the darkest part. She read again. I have been told if I silence them, I will be silenced. They do not issue threats, they issue inevitabilities. Sean leaned forward. That sounds like blackmail. It sounds like he knew he was trapped. Karoline then held up a small envelope. I wasn't sure whether to show this, but after our last broadcast, I received something unexpected. A message not from inside Washington or Rome, but from Lisbon. Sean's eyes narrowed. Lisbon? She nodded. A priest contacted me through a private channel. He didn't give a name, only a voice message and a scanned letter. He said he had held this very book for 6 years after receiving it from a Vatican archivist who disappeared in 2018. He never spoke about it until he saw my face on TV. The audience murmured. Karoline continued. He told me, the time has come. You were right to open it. But be careful. The ones behind it don't hide behind doctrine. They hide behind progress. Sean took a breath. Did he mention S. Naman? Karoline nodded. He said it wasn't a group like we imagine. No clubhouse, no symbols. It's more like a binding agreement between powerful figures across continents. A mindset, a network. They speak at conferences, they write papers, but they move quietly and always, with institutional cover. She held up a page torn from the book, dated 3 weeks before the Pope's death. They told me their purpose was order, but order without truth is tyranny. I asked who leads them. They said the system does. A beat of silence followed. Then Sean asked the obvious, so, how far does this go? Karoline's answer was blunt. Farther than the Vatican. They're connected to major philanthropic groups, digital ethics boards, even certain think tanks in America. You've probably heard their talking points. They use phrases like faith for the future or compassion through consensus. But it's not real compassion. It's controlled narrative. Sean looked visibly shaken. And you're saying Pope Francis knew this? He figured it out too late, Karoline said. And by the time he wrote these entries, he'd already been cut out of decisions. They were bypassing him, holding closed meetings, rewriting internal documents under his name. One final note from the journal echoed through the screen, I am the Bishop of Rome, and yet I am not heard in my own house. The studio fell still. Karoline sat upright. This isn't about conspiracies. It's about silence. It's about what happens when institutions fall asleep at the wheel and people in robes use theology like a scalpel to reshape belief into obedience. Sean nodded slowly. So what's your next move? She looked directly into the camera. The map leads to a place they sealed off. They called it a relic of the past. But I believe the answers the Pope couldn't say out loud are there. Inside room 3. The studio lights dimmed just enough for the screen behind Karoline Leavitt to flicker to life. The audience leaned in instinctively, many with hands resting on their chests, waiting not for commentary, not for headlines, but for truth in its rawest, most unsettling form. Because what was about to be shown wasn't theory, it wasn't hearsay, it was footage. Karoline looked to Sean Hannity. He gave a small nod. Then she turned to the camera and said what no one expected to hear from a White House press secretary on live television. What you're about to see was hidden for a reason. But if the Pope trusted me with it, I can't bury it. With a click, the video played. The screen showed grainy, but undeniable imagery, a cold, candlelit stone chamber. Room 3 hidden somewhere beneath the Vatican. The camera was unsteady, like it had been hidden inside a torch bracket or behind a column. But the frame was clear enough. 4 men sat around a circular table made of ancient stone. All 4 wore silver masks, blank and reflective, hiding every expression. No one spoke at first. The only sound the faint crackling of candlelight. Then one voice broke the silence, deep British accent, calm and almost rehearsed. We must accelerate. The American girl is closer than you think. A murmur rippled through the crowd in the studio. Sean Hannity's jaw clenched. On the wall behind the masked men, visible just over one's shoulder, was a hand-drawn map, the exact same one from the leather-bound book Pope Francis had left behind. Identical. Same red circles, same arcs silentium. Karoline froze the frame. This, she said, voice sharp, is what the Pope feared. These aren't priests. These aren't theologians. These are strategists. Inside the Vatican. Sean turned to her, his voice low. Where did this come from? Karoline held up the small USB drive, black and unlabeled. It was inside a slit in the book's back cover. No markings, no explanation. I took it to a digital forensics expert. It's clean, not altered. It was recorded based on time code about 2 months before the Pope died. The room was silent. She pressed play again. A second masked figure leaned forward and said, If she finds the door, delay her. If she opens it, discredit her. If she speaks, let Rome burn and let her burn with it. Sean Hannity's voice broke through the tension. This is not a conspiracy theory anymore. This is the Vatican from inside. This is real. Karoline nodded. This is what Pope Francis was trying to warn us about in his final writings. He said there were people who used faith as a mask who acted in robes but moved with political and financial interests. This proves he wasn't exaggerating. He was resisting something real and something coordinated. She pointed to the image of the 4 figures again. These men don't debate scripture. They discuss strategy. Look, this isn't theology. This is containment. She played a final 30 seconds. The camera view shook slightly, perhaps disturbed by a nearby movement. One of the masked men stood up and walked toward the back wall. There beneath the torchlight was something stunning, a hidden panel, a stone plaque carved with a symbol identical to the S-Namen sigil noted in the Pope's journal. Before the video cut out, the final sentence was chilling. A masked voice, almost a whisper. The third seal must not be broken, even if it means she does not walk out alive. The screen went dark. The studio sat in shock. No clapping, no gasping, just stillness. Karoline broke the silence. Now you know why the Pope didn't go public. Now you know why this book was hidden for years. Why I was warned to stay quiet. And why this moment, this video, may be the reason I'm being watched. Sean looked at her, visibly rattled. So what happens now? Karoline held up the book and the USB. We just moved from speculation to evidence. And that's why I won't stop. She turned back to the camera now with urgency in her voice. I'm not asking you to believe me because you like me. I'm not asking for blind faith. I'm showing you the unedited footage of 4 masked figures using the Pope's own words talking about me before I even knew they existed. She pointed to the symbol etched behind them. That's the symbol from the journal. That's the room he couldn't access. That's the seal he left to me. Sean shook his head. Karoline, this puts you in direct conflict with people who operate with global influence inside and outside the church. She nodded, and they know I won't go quietly. She then revealed one last piece. After the first episode aired, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a scrap of parchment with just 6 words. She who opens it won't close it. No signature, just the same symbol. That was the first night I stopped sleeping. The audience stirred. Karoline's voice steadied. They're watching this now, and I'm sure they are. Here's my message. I will walk into room 3. I will open what you sealed. Because the Pope didn't choose a bishop. He chose someone who wouldn't stop asking why. She looked to Sean. And I won't. The studio was still reeling from the footage. 4 masked figures. A hidden Vatican chamber. A plan to silence Karoline Leavitt before she even knew she was part of the story. But just as the screen went black and the audience struggled to process what they had seen, the studio itself began to feel different. The air changed, heavier, quieter, like something unseen had just stepped in. The lights above flickered once, then again. Sean Hannity glanced up confused. What's going on with the lights? Before anyone could answer, a sharp metallic bang echoed from backstage, quick, jarring, unmistakable. The kind of sound that doesn't come from dropped papers or shifting equipment. This was something solid, intentional. Karoline froze. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen. One new message. No name, no number. Just 6 words. The third seal must stay closed. You've said too much. The audience shifted in their seats. Sean leaned toward her. Karoline, what did it say? Her voice steady but cold replied, "They're watching. They heard everything." Before Sean could respond, a technician at stage left called out, Sean, we've got something here." He held up a photo newly found, just slid under the rear door of the studio while the lights flickered. Karoline reached for it. Her hand trembled just slightly, not from panic, but from the realization that this moment had crossed into a line even she hadn't fully prepared for. The image showed her and her son taken at a park in Virginia just weeks earlier. A candid shot. She was sitting on a bench, holding him in her lap, looking down at his little hands. A red circle was drawn in ink over both their heads. No words, no threats written out. But the message couldn't have been clearer. Karoline didn't blink. She handed the photo to Sean without a word. He looked at it then, up at her horrified. "This isn't a game," he said, voice low. "This is personal now." Karoline nodded. "It always was, but now they want me to remember that." The audience was stunned into silence. Sean stood. "We need to call security." Karoline raised a hand to stop him. "They're already watching. They wanted us to see this. That's why they didn't send it through email. That's why it's a photo, not a text. They wanted a moment, a warning, and they got it." She turned back to the camera. "And I'm still not stopping." The studio's backup lighting steadied, but the sense of unease didn't fade. "This is what happens," Karoline continued, "when truth threatens structure. They don't debate you, they don't argue, they intimidate, they follow, and when that doesn't work, they go after what you love." She looked down at her phone again. Still no name on the message. Just the words that had now become a mantra of opposition: "The third seal must stay closed." Sean looked at her, his tone sharpened by a mix of awe and concern. "Karoline, are you absolutely sure this is worth it?" She didn't hesitate. "The Pope entrusted me with something he couldn't say out loud. He left it not to a theologian, not to a cardinal, but to someone outside. He knew the risk. I accepted it the moment I opened that envelope on this very desk." She raised the photo again, this time for the camera. "I won't be bullied by cowards hiding behind masks, and I won't be silent because of shadows slipping through doors. She placed the photo face down on the desk, her voice quieter now. "But I won't pretend it doesn't shake me. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm not fearless, but I'm determined. And there's a difference." Sean stepped back into frame, visibly moved. "We've just witnessed something no press secretary in U.S. history has ever done. Not only reveal a global religious conspiracy, but stand her ground in the face of a threat most would walk away from." Karoline looked at the camera once more. "I didn't come here to be a symbol, I came to keep a promise. And no red circle on a photo is going to stop me from honoring a man who tried to fight the darkness with only a pen and a prayer." A moment passed. Then Sean turned toward the audience. "For those of you watching at home, this is real. This is unfolding in real time. And whether you agree with Karoline or not, what she's done tonight is nothing short of extraordinary." The screen behind them faded to black, but not before one last image appeared, zoomed in stills from the video shown earlier. One of the masked men had turned slightly, and under the mask's edge, the hint of a tattoo, barely visible, but familiar. Karoline saw it and went cold. She reached forward, froze the frame. "That symbol," she whispered. "That's not from the church. That's military." Sean stared. "You're saying one of them's not clergy?" "No," she said. "I'm saying one of them may not even be from the Vatican." The camera zoomed in again. The plot thickened. The photo of her and her son still sat face down on the desk. Its red ink circle burned into the minds of everyone watching. But Karoline Leavitt didn't flinch. Not anymore. The threats, the shadows, the video of masked men, the anonymous messages, they had brought her to the edge. Now standing on that edge, she made her decision. With her eyes fixed on the camera, Karoline sat upright, calm, composed, and unshaken. Araken. in the most dangerous moment of her public life. Then came the words that would define her legacy. If I stay silent, I keep my life, but if I speak, I keep my promise, and maybe I preserve the faith for my son's generation. Her voice didn't waver. It was the voice of a woman who had already counted the cost. Behind her, Sean Hannity remained silent, arms crossed, eyes locked on her, not as a host, but as an American witnessing something real unfold in front of him. No script, no talking points, just conviction. Karoline reached into the book, once more her fingers slow and deliberate. This time she turned to the very last page, the one she had never read aloud on air before. A handwritten note nearly faded, etched in hurried ink by a man who knew time was running out. Faith isn't preserved by hiding shadows, but by lighting candles in the dark. The handwriting was Pope Francis's. The page was dated 3 days before his death. Karoline held the book open as she looked back at the audience. Not the one inside at the studio, but the one watching across the country. Living rooms, nursing homes, quiet kitchens with Fox News on in the background. Americans who had followed her story, not out of political loyalty, but because they sensed something deeper, something true was breaking through the noise. This is no longer about me, she said, her voice catching but her eyes holding firm. This is a question for the world now. If the truth is buried in stone, who will dare to chisel it free? Sean stepped forward, barely above a whisper. You know you may not come back from this. Karoline gave a tight nod. I know. But the man who wrote this, he died with secrets. I won't. She closed the book. The sound echoed. For weeks now, I've been followed. I've been warned. I've been sent photos of my child with circles drawn around his head. They've tried fear. They've tried silence. But here I am, and I'm still speaking. She turned to Sean. You asked me in part 1 if this was political. No. It's spiritual. It's moral. And it's generational. She looked back at the camera, leaning forward. My grandmother used to tell me, Karoline, don't just stand for truth when it's easy. That's not courage. That's convenience. Real courage is doing it when you're scared, and you do it anyway. The room was still. Karoline continued, her rhythm quickening. This isn't just a Vatican story. This isn't just about faith. This is about every institution that's forgotten who it serves. This is about every voice that's been silenced for asking questions. Every family that's watched their values mocked. Every American who still believes that truth exists and that it's worth the risk. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the tattoo photo, the one they had isolated from the video in room 3. She placed it beside the book. I know what they're doing, she said. That tattoo doesn't belong to clergy. It belongs to a military contractor. And now we know someone with global security ties sat at that table behind that mask. That means this isn't just about Rome. It's about something bigger, something coordinated, something global. Sean's voice broke the moment. What happens now? Karoline exhaled. I go to Rome. The audience stirred. Sean stepped back. You're serious? I have to, she said. There's no more footage to show, no more pages to read. The rest is behind stone. The final proof is locked in room 3. And whatever's behind that third seal they built, an entire conspiracy to keep it closed. Sean looked off stage. Security personnel were shifting, whispering, watching every move. Karoline turned to the camera one last time that night. This is not a martyr's speech. I don't want to be a symbol. I want to be a mother who kept her word. A citizen who didn't flinch. A Christian who didn't trade light for comfort. Her voice dropped slightly, like she was speaking just to the viewer. I know they're watching. I know they're waiting. But I've already chosen. I'd rather be hunted for speaking truth than haunted for staying silent. She picked up the journal, the photo, the tattoo image, and the USB. She didn't wait for applause. She didn't need it. She walked off, set slowly, deliberately. Sean turned to the camera, his voice the most serious it had been in years. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed something historic. Whether you believe her or not, Karoline Leavitt has put herself on a path that few would dare walk. And next week she heads to Rome. She stood there still in the studio, but already somewhere else. The pages of the Vatican journal, yellowed, marked with trembling ink, were no longer just evidence. They were a path. And Karoline Leavitt, having survived threats, whispers, and photos meant to paralyze her, wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after coming this far, not after lighting a match in a world built to stay dark. She held the leather-bound book in her hands, as if it were something sacred, something final. Then, with one quiet breath and eyes steady on the camera, she made the announcement that silenced the entire room. I'm going to the Vatican. I'm going to find room 3. And if I don't come back, you'll know I tried. No dramatics, no trembling, just truth. The kind that lands in the center of your chest and stays there. Sean Hannity, who had stood beside presidents and challengers, who'd witnessed 1,000 headlines unfold from his own desk, found himself, for once, without words. He opened his mouth slightly, then shut it again. His throat tightened. His eyes said more than any line ever could. Karoline didn't wait for him to respond. She gently closed the book, ran her fingers over its cracked spine, and stepped back from the table. No farewell speech, no rallying cry, just the quiet certainty of someone who knew the road ahead might not have a return ticket. The audience, stunned into reverent silence, watched as she turned and walked off the set, still carrying the journal, the photo, the tattoo scan, and the USB drive items that had gone from mysterious to dangerous in a matter of days. As the cameras followed her out, the lights dimmed behind her. Not for drama, but as if the story itself was exhaling, letting her go. And then the screen went black, no music, no closing line, just silence. Then slowly white words faded in. If she enters the third room, what will the church become? The question hung in the air like incense in an empty cathedral. This wasn't the end of a television segment. This was the beginning of something the world wasn't ready for, but couldn't unsee. Because Karoline Leavitt wasn't just a press secretary anymore. She had become something else. A keeper of last words, a challenger of silence, a mother risking everything to honor a dead man's trust, and a living faith's future. In 1 week, she would board a plane, bound for Rome. But in many ways, she had already left. Her name was now a prayer in some corners and a threat in others. Church officials issued no statement. The Vatican remained silent. But digital back channels buzzed screenshots of the video clips of the masked men stills of the photo with the red circle theories about the tattoo. Commentators asked questions they wouldn't have dared weeks ago. What if she's telling the truth? What if room 3 exists, and perhaps the most chilling of all, what happens if she opens it? Back in New Hampshire, local parishioners lit candles at the steps of St. Peter's Basilica. Reporters gathered. No press release had been sent, no official Vatican acknowledgement. But something was shifting, quietly, worldwide. Americans, especially those 65 and older who had grown up trusting institutions, who had watched faith and tradition wrestle with modern chaos, now saw in Karoline someone familiar. Not polished, not perfect, but steady, principled, human. Her voice wasn't that of rebellion, it was that of remembrance, a reminder that truth is worth the weight it carries. And now the next chapter waited. Somewhere beneath centuries of marble and stone, beyond the reach of politics or camera flashes, a sealed door remained. Not metaphorically, literally. Behind that door, if the Pope's words were true, was not just a scandal or a secret. It was a test of what we fear, of what we're willing to protect, and of how far we'll go to hide something that once stood for hope. But now someone had found the map, and she wasn't turning back. In a world where silence often feels safer than truth, Karoline Leavitt's journey reminds us that courage doesn't always look like grand speeches. It often begins with keeping a promise. Her decision to speak up despite real threats to her safety and family echoes a deeper truth familiar to many older Americans that faith, integrity, and moral conviction are not negotiable, even when the cost is high. This story is not just about hidden chambers or Vatican secrets, it's a call to each of us to reflect what truths have we avoided out of fear and what kind of legacy are we leaving behind. For those who remember a time when words mattered and trust was earned, Caroline's quiet defiance feels personal. It tells us that truth still matters, that standing firm still counts, and that lighting a candle in the dark can be more powerful than 1,000 voices in the daylight. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and tell us what you would do in Caroline's place. Subscribe now to follow her next step and be part of a community that still believes truth is worth the fight